and welcome to our community. I'm Suzie Thomas, visiting today with Michelle Beyer, who you know here from the Light 95.9, on addiction, Voices of Hope, and talking about today the problem of addiction, the problem of substance abuse in our community, and what sources, what resources are available to people who might be having trouble with this particular problem and struggling with this. First of all, Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Suzie. How are you?
Well, doing really well, and so happy to see you. And you are the walking testimony of how a person is able to change their life, and by seeking out help,
Right.
and by finding the resources that are available to folks. First of all, for anyone who might not be familiar with you, that might be meeting you for the first time, let's tell them a little bit about your story. Who are you, Michelle?
My story is a little bit different in a way than other people. Yes, a lot of us have gone through the trauma of our abuse when we were little, and mine was the same: sexual, mental, all of it from my stepfather. But my drinking and drugging didn't start till I was 37 years old. I had 2 kids at that point. I was still married, and I didn't like the taste of alcohol when I was younger. I couldn't stand beer. If I could taste the alcohol, I was not drinking it. I only like strawberry daiquiris and things that were fruity. And then all of a sudden I'm drinking wine. I'm drinking Diet Coke and vodka. I start dating this 23-year-old when I'm 37, and he introduced me to cocaine.
Oh, my.
And it took me a really, really long time to try it, but I did. And then he also I started smoking again. I didn't smoke. I quit when I got pregnant. So I'm on this really bad path. And through this, I decided that I didn't want to be married anymore. I wasn't in love with my husband, and I really wasn't to begin with. I married him because I knew he could take care of me and get me out of my parents' house.
The abusive situations?
Yes. And he was not like my stepfather. He was calm. He was mild. I ran the roost, so to speak. And so I divorced him, and I didn't do it in a very nice way. I just wasn't a nice person. And my kids were, I think, 11 and 7 at the time. And they had this PTO Betty Crocker mom who went to drunken hoe, I guess is the only kind of word I'm going to use here today. And they didn't know what to do. And it really, it wasn't until my 3rd DUI that I started getting help. And I lost everything. I had lost my home in Jackson Township. I lost 2 cars. I lost my jobs. Eventually my kids moved out, went to New Jersey to stay with my sister, because after my 3rd DUI, I wanted to kill myself. My son called the police, and I spent a few days in Heartland, Massillon Behavioral.
Yes.
And then I went to rehab and jail, but I had been to jail before, and I never wanted to go back. On my 2nd DUI, I went, and I went for 20 days. And I mean, one of the things I had done, I always had a lot of one-night stands, and that kind of goes with the territory. And I'd gotten pregnant through one of them. And when I went into jail the 2nd time, I found out I was pregnant that morning. And when I got out of there, I did not want this child. And I know this goes against my beliefs as today and everyone else that's going to be listening. But what I did was I knew, being a special pregnancy with my son and my daughter, I had him 2 months early, I knew that I have a hard time carrying babies. So I did what I wasn't supposed to do to lose that baby, and I did. And, today I live with that. Yeah. Especially with all these moms that can't have children, like my sister. Again, when I was 40, I got pregnant again, which was a year later. And this time, I didn't do that. I was still drinking. I drank red wine, and I justified that. I'm like, oh, well, red wine's good for the baby. It really isn't good for the baby.
I don't think they recommend that when you're pregnant. No,
no, they don't. But I, said that in my head. And my sister, who cannot have children, she wanted to adopt him. And I found out it was a boy, because I have to have all that special attention when I'm pregnant. And I said, you can definitely have him, when I'm done here, because I knew I was going to be a good mom. I knew I didn't want to stop drinking. I just wanted to keep going and keep going. I wasn't done with my fun yet. And I said the only stipulation is I have to name him, because my ex-husband really did not let me name my first two children.
Mm-hmm.
So I named him Dominic. My sister named him Reed, and he lives in New Jersey. He's 7 years old, and he loves me. He knows I'm his, he came out of my tummy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not mom. He just came out of my tummy. I'm Aunt Michelle.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a joy. I love him to death. And yes, I have a lot of regrets. He should be raised in my home, but I was not going to be good for him. Just because I am now doesn't mean, I'm going to be able to at all.
Did you at any point, perhaps as you're sitting in jail, just say, oh my gosh, how did I get here? I was a suburban mom doing the PTO thing with 2 children. What do you attribute suddenly this developing a taste for alcohol and as you say, then cocaine later on?
Mm-hmm.
Help me connect those dots from PTO
it's very
to
easy
jail.
To connect those dots. I'm an addict. It's a disease. And what I did, I used to be 350 pounds. So my first love was food. And I started gaining weight from the age of 5. And during my high school years, I lost some of that chunk because I wanted a boyfriend. But when I met my husband, my ex-husband, I started chunking up. Then I had a gastric bypass in 2001, about 4 days earlier than the towers had fallen.
Oh my!
So I was sitting there recovering and my ex-husband. We were watching a movie, and we turned that off, and there we were watching the towers, which was horrifying because my sister-in-law worked close by, and she went through the towers with the PATH train. And once I started losing weight, that addiction changed very gradually at first. I started going out with the girls after the PTO meeting, drinking, and then I liked the taste of vodka. I liked what it did for me, and it was a way to fill the void that I didn't even know I had. And it was quick. After about 6 months, then it progressed to the point where I wasn't coming home for the weekend, and my kids were left with babysitters, and it was just horrible. And by the third DUI, I wasn't planning on going to rehab. As a matter of fact, that's what my lawyer told me the judge wanted me to do, and I was so not nice to Judge Centrone. I told him where to go and walked out of the courtroom. Why I wasn't arrested, I have no idea.
Wow.
And so he ended up, after I went to rehab, I wasn't doing very well. I have a hard head. I'm Italian from Jersey. It takes a lot to get through this head. So, and I found, God. I was introduced to a Bible from a friend of mine, and he told me my life was going in circles.
Yeah.
I wasn't changing anything. I was just going round and around and around. And he told me the story, and I started reading the Bible. But I have to say, I had gotten out of Heartland, and I had read Matthew while I was there, and I had seen over on the curtain, and I don't care who thinks I'm crazy. I saw Jesus in that curtain. I looked away, and he was gone.
Wow.
And then on the bed ruffle, I saw a bare tree with 2 angels on each side of it. And then I go out to lunch with you, and you hand me, and I'll never forget where we were. I can remember where we were sitting, and you handed me A Purpose-Driven Life, and on the cover of that book was the tree that I saw.
Oh my gosh.
Except mine was bare.
Yeah.
And so now that I know more, because I've been reading ever since, I know what that meant. And I know that he was watching me, and he was there with me, and he wanted my tree full. And I believe today it is getting fuller and fuller and fuller as I get closer and closer and closer. And I have decided that I just got out of an 8-year relationship, and I have decided that I am no longer, I might go out to dinner, but I am no longer bringing a man that closely into my life in any way, shape, or form, because I know God has something waiting for me. And like a little kid, you have to be good, and you have to get your present, your big present, I want my big present. I want my big present. And I know that he's good. I want my Boaz.
Wait for the Boaz. Always worth waiting for.
Yeah.
your relationship with your children had to be very difficult during those years.
Oh, yeah.
And then often when someone has an encounter with a living God and has their life changed so dramatically as yours has been, sometimes children or others can be a little skeptical at first, and it might take them seeing is believing. Let me see some differences in your life before I buy into this completely.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit as far as the
can.
transition with your own children?
I can. When I was in jail, my son, my ex-husband was bringing him back from New Jersey, and my son wanted to live with him and not me. And my daughter had no choice at that point, but she eventually came to live with me. And pretty much, and I had her as a guest on my show twice. And she told the world that she didn't think of me as her mom. She thought of me as a stepmom. She needed me back then. I wasn't there, for her or him. And my son, ended up being the man of the house. And he rules my ex-husband's house now.
Wow.
But a lot can change. A lot has changed because they've watched me. They've seen me grow. They can now trust, and I'm not too sure how much they still fully trust, but I know I've made huge headways with my daughter.
That builds every day, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And this past Mother's Day, my daughter wrote me a card. She made the most special Mother's Day for me ever, 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 ever. And she handed me this card, and I opened it up, and I turned it over, and it said, I didn't have room on the inside to express how proud I am, and I call you my mother 7 years ago. If someone would have asked me about you, I would have said, what mom? And now she said, I have the privilege, the rare privilege of telling them your encouraging story. And she said, I feel so bad. Me and my brother were awful to you while you're, in your addiction and now in your recovery, and I just treated you awful, and I'm sorry you had nobody there to help you when you should have had your family. And again, I'm sorry, and I'm here for you now.
Wow.
I mean, I still kind of tear up when
Wow.
I hear that or read that. And I took this card into SRCCC when I was speaking to the inmates there. And the girls are separated from the boys, so I read it to the girls who have no hope. They don't think that their kids are ever going to want to be with them again. And that's not true, but you have to do the work. You have to show an example. You have to be the example. It's just like we're taught when we're raising our kids, you can't just tell them what to do. You have to show them what to do. If you don't want them drinking and smoking and everything else, then you shouldn't be drinking, smoking, and everything else. And that doesn't always work. If you have addiction in there and they get one little substance going, that's pretty much the end of it. It's very hard.
Well, like any illness, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It has to be addressed like any other illness.
And that's so funny that you say that, because I have on my show said constantly, it's like cancer.
Yes.
It really is, and it should be treated. We don't get treated that way. And you could either die from addiction or you could die from, the cancer. You could go into remission with cancer. You can go into remission with addiction. It's pretty much exactly the same thing. Well, they say, well, I didn't ask to have cancer. Well, I didn't ask to have an addiction disease either. Well, you picked up a drink. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Most people out there do pick up a drink. They don't know. They have a glass of wine, or their parents, encourage it for some reason, when they're a kid, especially in the Catholic religion, where you're going to make your first Holy Communion and they give you wine, and they ask you to give them wine at home. So that's pretty much that.
Michelle's story is so dramatic, and we're going to find out more after these words. Stay with us.